This past week, our plan was to finish off our Authentic Faith series. And Pastor Amato was going to bring a word and talk about another hero of our faith. But with everything that's happened and decided on Friday, we as pastors and leadership felt like it would be best to give a message that speaks directly to what we are going through. And so this morning, we're going to be making a U-turn and spending 1 week talking about this idea of being surrounded. And for the last week and a half, our lives have been surrounded by news and media and commentary about COVID-19. Almost every aspect of our lives has been impacted in some way by this epidemic. I mean, even now, within this 3-week stay-at-home mandate by our government, like I said earlier as we started the service, we came here on Saturday morning to record this service, not sure what the implications would be starting at 5 p.m. on Saturday. This COVID-19 outbreak has altered almost everything normal in our lives. In Illinois, unfortunately, we are already seeing the negative impact of it as this virus has infected people. This virus has taken the lives of people. And for some of you that are gathering with us this morning, you're only one touch away from those people. Those are your family and close friends. For others, we're just a couple touches away. We know someone who knows someone who's been infected. So I don't know about you, but over these next few weeks, probably every single day I'll be getting up, either turning on the news or checking my phone to see if the curve has flattened in America. We're just surrounded by it. And when you feel surrounded by it, maybe you can resonate with me. I feel overwhelmed. I don't know about you, but this does feel like an overwhelming situation. Not only overwhelming for myself and my family and my kids, not only overwhelming for our church and our local community, but I think of many of the people that we just took some moments praying for recently. I feel overwhelmed for them. I feel overwhelmed thinking about the responsibilities that our medical professionals, our first responders are taking on during this time as they deal with some of the most severe cases of COVID-19 and are risking their lives daily to help those who are in need. I feel overwhelmed thinking about the many people who have already lost their job or in this next week will lose their jobs. I feel overwhelmed for the grocery store workers and the managers who are having to interact with so many people daily. And as you know, grocery stores have been a chaotic scene this past week and a half. Even at home every single day, I feel overwhelmed for so many of you parents who have turned into homeschool teachers for who knows how long. There's just a lot to feel overwhelmed with at this time because we are surrounded by the negative implications of COVID-19. Yet being overwhelmed, being surrounded on all sides is not something that's new to God. And it's actually not something that's new to God's people. In fact, God has been and will continue to go before us, to fight the battle against what's going on around us, to go before us and fight the battle as we feel overwhelmed with anxiety and despair and discouragement. And He goes before us to give us a peace and a comfort amidst this epidemic. And so this morning, I want us to dive into a story within the Bible in which we see the people of God surrounded on all sides. And so if there's one thing I want you to get from this message this morning, it's this. If you're taking notes at home, you can write it down. Our big idea is this. When you're surrounded, you look for God. When you're surrounded, you look for God. I believe that it's in these moments when we are surrounded, when we feel overwhelmed, that the best thing that we can do is look for God at work. See how God is going before us. See how God is fighting the battle, and that victory is only found in Him. And so our story takes place in 2 Kings chapter 6. It may be an unfamiliar story for most of you, so if you have a Bible, go ahead and turn to 2 Kings chapter 6. If you have a Bible at home, you can go to the table of contents at the beginning, and the book of 2 Kings is the 11th book in the Bible. So it'll be a couple flips of the pages for you to get there. As well, throughout this time together, we will be showing the verses on the screen. And so as you're turning there, just want to remind you that here at CCCH, we teach from the Bible every week because we believe God has primarily spoken to us through His Word. And not only do we believe the Bible, God's Word, is true, but that it's very applicable to our lives today. 2 Kings chapter 6. It's a strange story, and our main character is the prophet Elisha. And so before we dive into the story this morning, let's set up some background information as to what is going on in Elisha's life as well as in the nation of Israel. This story takes place in Israel's history when there are two kingdoms. There's the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And so our story takes place in the northern kingdom under the rule of King Aram. Now, like every king in the north, if you read throughout the books of 1st and 2nd Kings, what you realize is that every king in the north was evil. They never did good in the eyes of the Lord. They always led the people of Israel away from God and into false worship. So throughout the book of Kings, God continuously sends prophets to let the people of Israel know that they need to repent and turn back to God, that they need to forsake what they are doing, seek God for forgiveness that He's willing to give them, and turn back to God in obedience. And this message that Elisha shared would be something they would hear every single day. It kind of reminds me of something that maybe we're not using as much anymore, but we used, a couple of weeks ago. There's this thing on your phone that you used every day when you had structure and schedule in your life. Maybe we're not there anymore, but a couple of weeks ago, when we had a schedule, when we had structure, there was this one thing we used on our phones to get us going every single day. You may remember it. It's the alarm on your phone to wake you up. That's right. We're not using that anymore without the structure and schedule. Maybe you are, I'm not sure. But if you remember, jog your memory a little bit, the alarm on your phone, you would set it every morning, and when it would go off and yell at you to wake up, what would you do? You would turn it off and go back to sleep. You would hit snooze 15 times on it. Or maybe some of you smacked the phone to the ground because you didn't want to wake up, and that's why you have a crack in your screen. Just saying. But when it comes to alarms, it gave us the same message every single morning. Wake up. It's time to get going. Wake up. Your day is starting. Wake up. You don't want to be late. Wake up. You got things to do. It's annoying. It's frustrating when it's going off at 4:30, 5:30 in the morning. You don't want to hear that loud noise. And for many of us, we have to make the noise even louder because it won't wake us up. That same loud, annoying noise is exactly what the people of Israel thought Elisha's warnings to him every single day sounded like. Elisha, we don't want to hear turn back to God. We don't want to hear God's love us. We don't want to hear that we need to repent and follow Him once again. Stop talking. Stop being annoying. Take your message somewhere else. We don't want to hear it anymore. So it's within this time period, within this culture in Israel, that our story takes place. And Elisha steps to the podium to be used by God. And God not only gives him a word to say, but what God does is some amazing miracles through His prophet Elisha. In 2 Kings chapter 4 and chapter 5 and chapter 6, we see what's commonly known as the compassion miracles of God. There are 7 different miracles that God does through Elisha, with the main purpose in each of them to make Israel turn back to God. That's the focus. That's the reason God does these miraculous things. Not to show off, but to turn people back to Him. And so 2 Kings chapter 6, what we're going to read this morning, is the 7th of those compassion miracles for the people of Israel. So we're going to start here in verse 8. It says this: Now the king of Aram was at war with Israel. After conferring with his officers, he said, I will set up my camp in such a place. The man of God, that's Elisha, sent word to the king of Israel, beware of passing that place because the Arameans are going down there. And so the king of Israel checked on the place indicated by the man of God. Time and again, Elisha warned the king so that he was on his guard in such places. This enraged the king of Aram. He summoned his officers and demanded of them, tell me, which of us is on the side of the king of Israel? None of us, my lord the king, said one of his officers. But Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. It's kind of a funny story. We see God's compassion towards Israel, even though Israel wants nothing to do with them. He continues to protect them and save them from the attacks of the Aramean armies. And so he gives Elisha a word and says, the king of Aram is trying to come to this location and they're going to take out this part of the northern kingdom. So Elisha tells the king of Israel tells the army there and the people retreat and get away. So as the king of Aram and his army get closer, they realize that there's no one there to battle. And this happens over and over and over again, which is why the king says, who's the traitor? Who's letting Israel know our plans? What's happening? And they're like, sir, it's not us. We're not doing it. It's this guy Elisha, the prophet. God's telling him exactly what you're saying, even in private. King of Aram's not happy. He's not happy this is happening to him. So look how he responds in verse 13. Go, find out where he is, the king ordered, so I can send men and capture him. The report came back. He's in Dothan. Then he sent horses and chariots and a strong force there. They went by night and surrounded the city. Verse 15, when the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. Oh no, my lord, what shall we do? The servant asked. And stop right there. The king of Aram, he's going after Elisha. He wants to take out the source. Who's coming and destroying his plots? Well, he's going to destroy that person. And so they find out where Elisha's at. They find out where Elisha's servant is at as well, in the city of Dothan. And so they go there and they surround the entire city. So Elisha's servant wakes up that morning and he sees the Aramean army surrounding the city and closing in on them. I feel like if I was in the servant's shoes, and maybe you can relate, I would be freaking out as well. And it kind of feels like even in our culture, that's how this virus is spreading. It just feels like it surrounds us. We are surrounded daily by negativity. We're surrounded daily by doom and gloom if we get on social media or turn on the news. We feel like every time we go out in public, if anyone coughs or sneezes or looks like they're going to cough and sneeze, we're surrounded by it. And so we walk around with Clorox wipes in our hands. I'm not patronizing, I'm just saying that's the reality. We feel surrounded. We go out in public and we walk on eggshells. I saw a post this past week from a random person, and he said over this past week and a half, he's felt overwhelmed by the situation because there's been two different responses that he's tried to take, and both of them have been critiqued. The first response is that people feel like he's not doing enough or caring enough about this situation and making light of it, and so he feels guilty from one set of people who say, you're not making this to be as serious as it is. And then there's another group of people when he feels like he does something or acts in a certain way, and they come back and they say, well, you're overreacting. And so he gets shamed by those people for overreacting, and he gets guilted by the people who say he's not doing enough. And so no matter what he does, no matter what he says, no matter what he thinks, no matter what he posts, he always feels like he's doing the wrong thing. He's overwhelmed. And I'm sure all of us, in some way, shape, or form, can feel that way. That's why I think all of us could see ourselves in the servant's shoes and be freaking out in this situation. Yet Elisha's response is different. Look here at verse 16. It says this. "Don't be afraid," the prophet answered. "Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." And Elisha prayed, "Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see." Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked, and he saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. This huge battle seems overwhelming. The big obstacles are standing in the way. And what Elisha tells his servant, he says, just look up and look for God. And what he does as he rolls back the spiritual curtain is he sees these fiery chariots and he sees these horses all around. These aren't physical things. These are the angels of God, the warriors of God. And so God's army in the spiritual realm is protecting Elisha and his servant. They felt like they were surrounded, but now the Aramean army is surrounded. The tables have turned, and now Elisha is the favorite. And before we jump into the rest of this story, I want to point out something here. Without minimizing the physical realities that we're dealing with COVID-19, there is a spiritual component to this that we can't miss and we can't minimize either. There are physical battles that we are facing daily with the spread of the flu. However, there are spiritual battles that you and I are dealing with of hopelessness and discouragement. And so when we look at a text like this and we look at a story like this, do we remember what was the purpose behind this miracle that's about to take place? These were compassion miracles. And the point was not for God to do the miraculous to defeat the enemy. It was for God to do the miraculous so that the people of Israel would turn back to God. Church, one of our hopes and one of our prayers during this time is that you and I individually, first and foremost, would turn back to God. That as we pass through this season, that we would focus less on the things of this world and that we would focus more on the God of this world. That our hope and prayer is that people in our community, in our nation, in our world, as they deal with their fears and anxieties about this, that instead of going that way, they would turn to faith and trust in God, and they would also turn back to God. That they would begin trusting Him, that they would reestablish their trust in Him. This is an opportunity for us to turn back to God. And I think there's 3 ways this morning that we can do that. The first one is this, is that we can look back to what God has done. We look back to what God has done. When the battle feels overwhelming, when you don't feel like even going to battle and trying to get through this, look back on what God has done for you. Remember the times that God has been personally faithful in your life, how He's helped you to overcome obstacles in your past. Remember the times in the pages of scriptures where you have read stories of God being faithful time and time again. Remember the times in our world's history when people were living for God or people were not living for God, whether people were believing in God or people weren't believing in God, that God came through. Whether it was the world wars or the Spanish flu epidemic. Think about 9/11 or the stock market crash. It didn't matter if people believed in God or didn't believe in God. God got the entire world or entire country through that difficult time. When we feel overwhelmed, we have to remember and look back on what God has done for us. You know, Elisha's servant, he could have done that same thing. Because a few verses before, he could have recalled how God was giving the word to Elisha to time and time again help the Israelites retreat because they were not ready to go to battle against the Aramean army. And how God was kind and gracious and compassionate to give that word to the king of Israel to save a people, a nation that he loved that wanted nothing to do with him. We have to look back on what God has done for us. Let's continue on verse 18. The story gets even more interesting. As the enemy came toward him, Elisha prayed to the Lord, "Strike this army with blindness." And so he struck them with blindness, as Elisha had asked. Elisha told them, "This is not the road, and this is not the city. Follow me. I will lead you to the man you are looking for." And he led them to Samaria. So not only is there this enormous spiritual army around the Arameans that they don't see yet, just Elisha and his servant see, but God uses that army to then blind the enemy. And as they come closer to the city, Elisha comes out and says, "Oh, you're looking for Elisha? He's not here. Hey, I'll take you to him. Come follow me. We'll go this way, and I'll take you right to who you're looking for." And so they blindly follow him right into the city of Samaria, which, by the way, is the capital of the northern kingdom. And so Elisha leads them into a trap. They're done for. They got nothing else that they can do. They're going to be taken over and destroyed because all the Israelite army, all the Israelite leaders, the king of Israel, are all right there. They are about to be surrounded not only by God's angels and God's army, but by the nation of Israel and their army as well. And so before we read the rest of the story, here's the second thing that we can look to God for. It's this. After we've looked back to what God has done, we can look up and see God at work. We can look up and see God at work. Elisha's servant was so worried about the physical obstacles around him, the overwhelming battle that was about to take place. But Elisha, he looked up to God. He looked up into the spiritual realm, and he realized that in that moment, it wasn't about the physical battle around him, but about the spiritual battle above him. And for us in our situation today, without once again minimizing the physical reality, as well without minimizing the connection between the physical and the spiritual that takes place in our world every single day, we have to acknowledge that in the spiritual, that Satan will do everything he can to use this virus to destroy humans, not only physically, but emotionally and racially and spiritually. Satan and his army of demons are trying to thwart God's plan to bring good out of this very difficult thing we are enduring. But this spiritual battle around us doesn't have to scare us. We don't have to be afraid of what we cannot see. Why? Because we can be confident to look up at what is surrounding us. Now, Elisha's servant, he got the curtain rolled back. He was able to see up everything going on. But by faith, we can believe that God is at work. We know from scriptures that there was a time before the creation of the world that an angel named Lucifer, he convinced 1/3 of the angels in heaven to try and take the power from God. But he failed. And God sent Lucifer and 1/3 of those angels out of heaven forever. And now we know Lucifer to be Satan and those angels to be demons. Now, I haven't taken a math class in a while. And if you wanted to contact me this week to help your student figure out their math homework, I probably wouldn't be the best person to do that. However, I'm pretty sure that if 1/3 of the angels fell, that there's still 2/3 in heaven that are good. And I believe 2/3 is double than 1/3. And so no matter what we feel surrounded by on this earth, no matter what we feel surrounded by in the heavenly realms, we can be confident that we have more on our side, that we are more powerful on our side, that we can be confident moving forward that God will protect us and take care of us because the battle is ours and the victory is ours because we got more on our team. We will always outnumber the enemy. So even if we can't see the spiritual battle, the spiritual reality around us, we can be confident that we will win because we always got more than the opposition. And our team is way more powerful than the opposition. So we don't have to fear. We don't have to fear the overwhelming sense of nothing good in our lives right now because that's not true. We don't have to fear the spiritual reality because God is on our side. And what we see here in this story is that God miraculously leads this Aramean army into the center of Israel. And they're about to be delivered into the hands of the Israelites. It's a complete trap. I love it. And so here's how the rest of the story goes. Started in verse 20. It says this: After they entered the city, Elisha said, Lord, open the eyes of these men so they can see. Then the Lord opened their eyes, and they looked, and there they were, inside Samaria. And when the king of Israel saw them, he asked Elisha, Shall I kill them, my father? Shall I kill them? Do not kill them, he answered. Would you kill those you have captured with your own sword or bow? Set food and water before them so that they may eat and drink and then go back to their master. So he prepared a great feast for them. And after they had finished eating and drinking, he sent them away and they returned to their master. And so the bands from Aram stopped raiding Israel's territory. What? The Aramean army is surrounded. The Israelites can do whatever they want. And the king of Israel is like, I don't know what to do. Elisha, tell me, what should I do? What should I do? Should I kill him? Should we capture him? I don't know. It kind of reminds me of if you ever been to a birthday party for a 1-year-old. It's a great scene. I have 2 kids, Nora, who is almost 5, and Max is 3.5. And I remember their first birthday party. So whether you're a parent or a sibling, cousin, I think all of us have been at a first birthday party for a kid. And that glorious moment where they get their own space and they have the birthday cake in front of them, and everyone's got their phones and their cameras ready to take pictures and capture this moment. And what usually happens is that they don't know what to do. And so the parent has to take their hand and take their finger and dip it in the frosting, and then they still don't know what to do because they spent their first year of life of people just putting a bottle or a spoon in their mouth to eat, so they've never tried to do this before. And so the parent takes their finger and lets them lick the frosting, and then after that a couple times, it takes their hand, lets them grab a piece and put it in their mouth. And then after a while, the kid usually gets it, and they start going to the cake, and we see those amazing pictures on social media, but we all know it took about 25 minutes to get that best picture. But what Elisha is telling the king of Israel in that moment is, what I want you to do is I want you to take a knife. I want you to cut the pieces of the cake perfectly. I want you to put them on a plate, get the scoop of ice cream, put it on the plate as well. And then because everyone came to your birthday party, I want you to go around and give everyone the piece of cake and ice cream until everyone has gotten their slice and gotten their fill. And most likely it's not going to be enough for you to have any, but that's what we're going to do here now. You don't do that for a kid's birthday party, but that's exactly what Elisha was telling the king of Israel. This is not the normal pattern of capture prisoners and kill them or do whatever you want with them. This is not what we see throughout the Old Testament or in the ancient Middle Eastern culture. We don't see that happening. This is out of the ordinary. You feed them, you clothe them, and then send them on their way. If this is the first time you're reading this story, like the king of Israel, you were probably shocked to see this was the response that Elisha gave. And as we see here in verse 23, in the end, the Aramean armies stopped trying to attack the Israelites and they went on their way. And there was a time of peace between these two countries. The ending was a surprise for probably many of us, just like it was a surprise back then. Just like it would be a surprise to everyone at a kid's birthday party that this is what the cake moment would be. And when it comes to this COVID-19 epidemic, I think the ending that we all have in our mind of it being wiped away, I think is only part of the ending. But I believe God has a greater ending to it, of how He desires this to be. Now hear me out for a second. After the world does get through this epidemic, we believe that. Just like already we're beginning to see in China, where the curve has been flattened. And over the last couple days, on Thursday and on Friday, we saw that there are no new locally transmitted cases of COVID-19. Those are great things. So we believe we're going to get through this. We believe we're going to move forward. But what Satan would love it is that the church, God's people, His greatest enemies, settled for only that victory. See, I believe God's got a greater victory for us, just like he had a greater victory for the Israelites that day. And this is the last thing that we can look to God for. Number 3 is this, is that we can look forward to God's plan for us. Is that we can look forward to God's plan for us. Ultimately, what God has for us, has for you individually and for your family, once again, without minimizing the amazing thing that will take place when we have a vaccine or COVID-19 is done spreading, God has something more for his people. If you remember, these compassion miracles, their main focus was to help the people of Israel turn back to God. Nothing to do with Elisha, nothing to do with the Israelites defeating their enemy, everything to do about being in right relationship with God. And this is why Elisha tells the king of Israel, let them free. Show them compassion, show them mercy, send them on their way. Give them what they do not deserve. Because it was a beautiful picture of what God had consistently been doing to Israel this whole time. Even though they were acting as enemies towards God, God graciously loved them and he cared about them. And this was an amazing picture of God saying to Israel, look what you are doing to them. This is what I've been doing to you. I love you. Come back to me. Turn to me. Repent of your sins. I want to be in right relationship with you. And so in the same way, we do look forward in the days ahead where we can give God all the glory and honor and praise for what he will do here on this earth, wiping this virus away. But we as a church also need to be a part of the battle of spreading the love of Jesus, showing the love of Jesus to a world that is in desperate times and desperately needs a right relationship with God. God wants his church, his people, to rise up and be a light in the dark world. He wants his church to give hope to the hopeless, bring peace to the restless, spread joy to the hurting. God desires that for us. And I believe that in this season, specifically even in these next 3 weeks, how we act and how we talk and how we post will be our opportunity to look ahead as to how God is going to use us to accomplish what he wants to accomplish during this time. And so when our attitudes in post are of praise and thanksgiving, not venting and complaining, we join God in fighting the battle and helping people see how amazing he is and helping people look to him and turn back to him. When our comments and conversations are filled with optimism and encouragement and not harsh critique and judgment over every decision that's made by government officials, we join God in fighting the battle and bringing hope and healing to a world that needs it, of helping people look to God and turn back to him. God is ready to use his church so that the end goal not only includes being people made physically well, but people being made spiritually whole. And that all happens as we live out our faith in Jesus, all because of his glorious life and death and resurrection. Church, when you're surrounded, you look for God. When you're surrounded, you look for God. In a moment, Brian's going to come back up here and he's going to lead us in an opportunity of worship to declare how amazing God is, to join God in the battle of speaking how awesome he is and praising him for all that he has done, all that he is doing, and all that he will continue to do. And so you may want to stand in your home. You may want to sit down and just have these words sung over you. I'm not sure where you're at this morning. But I believe that God is calling his church to rise up, to look for him as we feel surrounded on all sides, and be reminded that when we're surrounded, we're actually surrounded by him. We're surrounded by his army, that he is for us and not against us, and that he's going to use us to make an impact so that the whole world can see how amazing he is, and that we as a people of God would not only individually turn back to God as we look to him, that we would help other people who have ran from God, want nothing to do with God, and they would turn back to him as well. Church, these next 3 weeks, it's our opportunity. What are we going to do? When we feel surrounded, let's look to God. And what we're going to see is the heart of a loving Father who loves and cares about us so much and wants to use us on mission so that other people can be a part of the family of God.